Walt Disney once said that for every laugh there should be a tear, which is why I think, anyway, he would have loved Drawn to Life, that hugely entertaining, surprising, and emotional spectacle, which is now being presented live on stage at Disney Springs in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. Presented by Cirque du Soleil and Disney, this is a show that I can guarantee you will captivate audiences of all ages. Drawn to Life is a must-see, family-friendly spectacle that will leave you, well, in awe. So don't miss out on your chance to be part of the magic. Plan your visit to Disney Springs today and reserve your seats for Drawn to Life by Cirque du Soleil and Disney live on stage. Set your imagination in motion. Hey gang, Jim Hill here with an apology. My audio in a couple of places in this week's episode isn't great. That's because, well, we had a nor'easter come through last week and knock out power here at the house for a couple of days. And so when it came time to record this week's Disney Dish, I had to pack up all my gear and then schlep down to Massachusetts, where I then recorded this episode of Disney Dish in the dining room of my sister-in-law's house. To be honest, I'm not sure what caused the weird electronic thing you'll hear in the background of my audio in a few spots in today's show. Our editor, Nick Healy, has suggested it might have been a bad cable or maybe a loose connection, which, given what I had to jury-rig in order to get this week's Disney Dish out the door on time, is entirely possible. Anyway, just wanted to give you a heads up about this audio issue before this week's Disney Dish officially got underway. So thanks in advance for your patience, and now on with the show.
Welcome back to another edition of the Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. It's me, Len Testa, and this is our show for the week of Schmurz Day, April 8th, 2024. On the show today, lots of news and listener questions. Then in our main segment, Jim tells us how Disney World's Tomorrowland came to be. Let's get started by bringing in the man who says that after 7 movies, he thinks maybe some of Tom Cruise's missions are actually possible. It's Mr. Jim Hill. Jim, how's it going? Drew, that's for you, by the way.
There we go. I was about to say, him and Charles Hood. Lovely plug for Light Diffuse there. By the way, if we're talking about Mr. Cruise, he does actually have a tie to the Walt Disney Company. In fact, one of the very first films that Michael Eisner greenlit when he came through the door was The Color of Money, which paired Tom Cruise with Paul Newman, and Paul Newman took home an Academy Award for that. That was followed in 1988 by Cocktail, which, if you know the Beach Boys song, Kokomo.
People are cursing you, Jim. I can hear them screaming in the background.
Release the earworm! Okay.
All right. Yeah.
But the project that always fascinated me in regard to Mr. Cruise was, for a time after the original Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out in 1989, Disney kicked the tires of a couple of different ideas for sequels, and one of them was Who Discovered Roger Rabbit. It was actually set back in New York. It was Roger having success on Broadway and then going to Hollywood. But the human he was supposed to be partnered with was Tom Cruise. And in fact, to give you some idea how long ago this was, Mr. Cruise was supposed to appear with his then wife, Nicole Kidman.
Wow. So a while. Yeah.
For a while. But interesting, one last little tidbit here. Len, if you want to hear a piece of the score, a song that Alan Menken wrote for the movie, you can go to YouTube right now and type in This Only Happens in the Movies. Kerry Butler performs it. But you can actually hear a little bit of Who Discovered Roger Rabbit.
I'll put the link in the show notes. That sounds lovely. And I think the title of it is great, too.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that, Jim. And thanks to everyone who subscribes to the show over at patreon.com/Jim Hill Media, including Rob Isler, Jeff Kays, Jason Eatman, JDM, Jason Lambert, and Kevin Regan. Jim, these are the Disney cast members coming up with all kinds of ideas to modernize Disney's Autopia attraction around the world. Some ideas, like having guests install a child seat before boarding the ride, were too difficult for anyone to actually figure out. But hiding 3-year-old but still edible McDonald's French fries under the seats has tested remarkably well. True story. We want to make it as realistic as possible.
That's a little bit of Hannah and Alice right there, folks.
It is, right? Every parent who's ever put in a car seat or tried to clean their car out after kids understands entirely that. All right. On to the news, Jim. The news is sponsored by touringplans.com. Touring Plans helps you save time and money at theme parks like Walt Disney World. Check us out at touringplans.com. All right. Every show should begin with a round of self-congratulations, Jim. This week we have 2. On last Monday's show, I told you, Jim, tell me we're done making changes to classic Frontierland attractions. And you laughed and laughed and laughed.
Okay.
Our friends over at WDW Magic and other sites reported that same day that Disney has plans to demolish the Frontierland Shooting Arcade to make way for a DVC lounge. And obviously that's what we were referring to. Disney hasn't confirmed anything yet, but from what we're hearing, the arcade won't make it past Memorial Day, so make your plans accordingly. And Jim, I'm just throwing this out there. If anyone wants to make t-shirts celebrating the arcade along with the words, "You can pry this laser rifle from my cold dead hands," I give that to the community.
I want one. That's brilliant merch right there.
There's a couple of things. One, we've talked about surveys that Disney's been sending out for over a year now, asking people for adjectives that describe certain attractions. And my understanding is that the Frontierland Shooting Arcade got a higher than normal number of problematic responses. Things around like glorifying gun culture every time there's a school shooting, right? It comes up. So it was kind of on borrowed time anyway. Also, it doesn't generate revenue. So a culturally problematic attraction that doesn't generate revenue in the most valuable theme park real estate in the world is kind of a setup to failure, right? I'm a little unsure as to how many people you can fit in that area. I've got to go back and look at the maps and the plans. I'm assuming this is going to be a multi-story concept, right? Not just a single story, because there's not that much room there.
Well, the interesting thing is, my understanding is the back of house. I mean, face it, the shooting gallery goes back about 30 or 40 feet there. And evidently out behind there was some retail storage and, equipment used to service. So, there might be a surprisingly big footprint.
Yeah, I'm expecting 2 stories, at least 2 for that too. So that's good. And, the other thing too is it'll give people who own DVC a place to relax in the park. So that's good. So the other round of self-congratulations we should have, Jim, is a couple of shows ago we floated the idea of a Central or South American theme to Dinoland. Last week, Disney Imagineering released more details about those Dinoland changes in Animal Kingdom and explicitly referred to, quote, tropical Americas as the theme. So everyone bust out your geography handbooks. The tropical Americas is defined as basically the area from the northern part of Cuba to the middle of South America, which includes the Yucatan part of Mexico, all of Central America, and about 2/3 of the countries in South America. Jim, not for nothing, but the current theme of Dinoland does relate to this because the northern coast of the Yucatan is where the impact crater that killed the dinosaurs can be found from 66 million years ago, right off the coast. Yeah. So thematically, we're actually okay here, even as a transitional story, which is good. Also, the Disney's original concept art for Dinoland, the redo, had what looks like a Moana-themed flume log ride on the left side of the art, roughly where Dinorama is today. And Jim, I put this concept art in the show notes for everyone to look at. Moana is based in Hawaii. Technically, all of Hawaii is in the tropics, and it's part of the United States of America, which would fit into a flexible definition of tropical Americas, right? However much Imagineering cares about theming, management only cares about revenue. So Disney would shoehorn Moana into an Indiana Jones / Encanto themed land if they thought they could make money at it. Here's the thing that I think is difficult there. Encanto made $257 million when it came out in 2021 in a pandemic, which is more than Moana made in 2016 without a pandemic. And Coco, because Coco is sort of like the third thing rumored for this, Coco in 2017 made $210 million, which for comparison purposes would be like giving Wreck-It Ralph 2 or Solo, a Star Wars story, their own rides. And I don't think that's the most likely scenario here.
Though that said, remember, Moana is a franchise the company is definitely, putting gas back in the tank. We have Moana 2 coming out this November. Likewise, we have our live action Moana with Dwayne Johnson, this time not just being the voice of Maui, but physically being Maui. So, again, you get within the company that this would be a priority, and obviously the parks in a situation like that, tend to step up.
I think it'll definitely be a dark boat ride. Like, I think that's definitely the second sort of like C or D ticket attraction there. And it's in the concept art, right? It's just a question of the theming. And I think you and I have heard, at least I've heard something different than Moana.
Going to be a very interesting D23 Expo. Did manage to get my tickets last week. However, got skunked when it comes to getting into the Honda Center to actually seeing any of the presentations. So, guess I'll have to hear secondhand about what goes on coming into the parks. So,
I think Carrie and David makes excellent gift baskets for your contacts in public relations. Just throwing that idea out there. And speaking of announcements, Disney's shareholder meeting was last week. It looks like Disney's current leadership team survived the fight for board seats led by activist investor Nelson Peltz and teams. All of Disney's recommended board members were elected. None of the alternatives were. And the votes ended up being not all that close for what was covered as a pretty close race. Shareholders preferred Disney's candidates by at least a 2-to-1 margin over the alternatives. But I think, Jim, the thing that was more interesting in those comments during the meeting was Bob Iger talking about a possible new Avatar-themed area in Disneyland.
Mm-hmm. By the way, was chatting with our good friend Mr. Schul, and he was the one who pointed out that we have to intu from this art, because remember, initially, early on in February, when Iger first mentioned that there was a Avatar experience headed to Disneyland, the initial thinking was, okay, when you say experience, you didn't say land, so is this something perhaps going into Star Wars Launch Bay in Tomorrowland? Whereas you look at this, that's the sky, Len.
That's a land.
That's a land.
That's a land. Yeah.
But not only a land, it's a land with palm trees. And in fact, we're one to sort of read the tea leaves here. It looks like this land keys off of the second Avatar movie, the Way of Water that came out year before last or thereabouts. And again, the very best pieces of concept art entice but don't necessarily reveal all that much.
Right. It's vibes.
There we go.
That's what the kids would say, yeah.
But at the same time, it's been interesting having people comment on the effect of, okay, that looks like a substantial boat ride as opposed to, the Navi River Adventure where it's like, oh boy, it's just getting, it's over?
It's what? Yeah, it's definitely a land. The middle of the concept art, the water part, looks to be roughly the size of at least 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that type of thing, or the Nemo Submarine Voyage in Disneyland. But then the show buildings beyond that on the right are substantial. I'm assuming that the mountain range that we see on the left, that is not the floating mountains, that would just be a wall or scrims or something like that to block it. Like I'm assuming flat panels there to save space.
I guess what intrigues me the most about this is looking at the size of this. This has to be the Disneyland Beyond
forward plane.
Disneyland Forward,
Disneyland Forward, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, so this is a blue sky multi-decade thing. In fact, we refer to it as blue sky, but this is so much farther away than the blue sky. I'm almost tempted to call it space black.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like it's that far away.
Yeah. Well, and just a reminder, folks, Disney first announced that they were getting in bed with Lightstorm to do Avatar-themed lands around the world, by the way. People seem to forget that, it wasn't just going to Animal Kingdom. It was going to go to Tokyo. It was going to go into Paris. But that was 2011. They didn't break ground to 2013. The land itself did not open till 2017. So just saying, we have a piece of art, and I'll meet all you nice folks at 2030 at the gift shop. Okay, just
exactly. Yeah. So he hinted about that. I mean, so it took us in the time it took for him to announce that they signed James Cameron to the time that it opened in 2017. They completely demolished the back part of Hollywood Studios. We got Toy Story Land. They were substantially on the way to Galaxy's Edge at that point, and they probably had already started work on Runaway Railway, which opened in 2020, in 2017, right? I mean, there was substantial Imagineering work done there. So, I mean, a lot of stuff can happen between now and the time that this happens.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But again, I guess that brings us to what Iger said about in response to Epic Universe, right? The whole notion of well,
go ahead.
Well, no, just he mentioned that he got a question about it. Why is Disney not prepped?
Not building anything.
Well, first of all, there was that comment to the effect of, we've known for 10 years that Universal was prepping a third theme park for Florida. So again, or at least a decade. So that's 2012, 2013. And Disney's decision was, our way of responding was to reinvest in our existing properties. And as you mentioned, for example, he cited, very strongly the multi-year, multi-billion-dollar transformation of Epcot. So we got Ratatouille in 2020, and then Cosmic Rewind 2021, and Journey of Water in 2023. And in the middle there, barely worth mentioning, Harmonious. So yeah, they did throw money at the parks. What are your thoughts about this? Was this a defensive response, or is this Bob Iger speaking the quiet part out loud?
Jim, imagine it's your wedding anniversary and you didn't get Nancy anything. And your response to Nancy saying, "Why didn't you get me anything for my anniversary?" is, "Didn't we have pizza together last week?"
You've been listening in on our date night, Len.
How do you think that would go over as an explanation? Oh, baby, all the things I've been doing for you the last few weeks, that's your anniversary present. That's what it sounds like to me. Like, because the implication then is, what I got out of it when I heard the comment was, so if Epic Universe wasn't being built, you wouldn't have done those things?
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
Tell me what Epcot would look like today or the studios would look like today.
Okay.
If Epic Universe wasn't being built, right? That it doesn't make any sense.
Okay. And what's especially, this argument falls apart in a heartbeat, because let's be honest, you look at Galaxy's Edge, and anybody who's actually been paying attention, that's Disney's response to Harry Potter, right down to the blue milk.
Right. It doesn't survive even a cursory review. So I'm going with no on that. The interesting thing for me in that is that we didn't get an actual date for opening that.
We did not. But what's been interesting just over like the last week to 10 days is, we did get indications of what sorts of pieces of plush we could buy.
Right. It's in Target as of this morning, right?
Well, I have to admit, it's like that actually fascinates me, because, the whole notion of, well, of course, you exit through a gift shop at the old Splash Mountain gift shop. So there's got to be something on the shelves. But the notion of, you have to help Tiana, gather up her little, animal musician friends to play at the party, who just coincidentally will also be on sale in the gift shop.
As plush that you can carry around without much inconvenience. Yeah, it's fascinating. I will say this, in the last couple of days, we've learned that Walt Disney World cast members are blocked out of the Magic Kingdom from June 3rd to June 14th, which we've previously heard a media event middle of June. So having the first 2 weeks of June as preview times kind of lines up with that cast member blockout date. Also, I note, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, but Test Track's last day of running is June 16th. So if you did a media event on the 16th and you closed off, that part of the park, you could direct people from the Magic Kingdom to Epcot to ride Test Track one last time before it goes down for the big refurb. That kind of makes sense both from a PR and a park ops perspective. Also, Iger mentioned Beyond Big Thunder, right?
Yeah. Which iteration? But all right, and please to continue.
And then, so Iger announces this, and then later on the day, the next morning, Disney said that it will begin filing permits soon for Beyond Big Thunder in the Magic Kingdom. And my guess is, just based on how we know these things work, the first thing that they need to file is with the water districts. So to do impact assessments there. So that should be coming up pretty soon. And that's going to give us a sense, Jim, of how large the project is going to be, right? Because Disney said it's going to be the largest expansion of the park. But, when it doesn't have an upper limit like that, it's tough to know what the boundary is going to be.
Okay, and remember, 2011, 2012, that was the exact language that was used for New Fantasyland. That, we went
good.
from, 10, 11 acres to 24, 25 acres. So that gives you the ballpark.
The other interesting thing is, if we're looking at the Magic Kingdom area, when the last set of water district permits were filed, there was some recategorization of the area to the west outside the park of Adventureland. I still think they're prepping that for another resort, but we'll see.
I know people have been talking about the DVC, the next to the Poly, and they don't necessarily care for the look unadorned. It'll be interesting when the hotel is finished and tricked out and all that. But face it, that thing will sell out in a heartbeat because it's on the monorail. So I don't think you're wrong about doing another DVC close to the park. In fact, something that bumped up against Adventureland like that would be printing money.
And remember, because Disney cares so much about revenue, all of the DVC revenue gets booked under theme parks. So every CEO of this company has to keep investing in DVC to keep that money train going, because the first one that doesn't is going to have a large hole to fill that can't be filled. So I will say this: and Bob Iger was speaking off the cuff, and I'm not going to fault anyone for saying something without having practiced it 100 times. But there's this one quote that just kind of made me laugh, and it was, "We have a lot of projects in development. Many of them are known to us." Which implies that there are projects in development that nobody knows about. All right, Bob. You know what? If I was speaking to that many people, I would be nervous as well. But that one just, that tickled me. Anyway, all right. More news. Disney told the LA Times that Autopia is going electric. So an article by Sammy Roth that came out last week confirmed that Autopia is converting its gas-powered cars to electric. Disney had no timetable. They said in the next few years. And Sammy Roth wasn't sure if they meant all electric or hybrid. And the explanation that they give for this is cast member safety. What do you think about that?
Well, what intrigues me is that the Autopia that opened, now mind you, it wasn't there for opening day, but it showed up a couple of years later for Hong Kong Disneyland, was electric. In fact, what was so funny about that, now mind you, it closed in 2016 because, well, here's the interesting thing, Len. In a city like Hong Kong where everybody uses public transportation, the idea of getting behind the wheel just didn't appeal to kids. It's like
Why? Yeah, why would you do this?
Yeah, so it was it kind of died of disuse in 2016, and it by the way, this was where their versions of Avengers Campus is eventually supposed to be built. But the other thing that was fascinating about Hong Kong, because it started out right out the door, it was all electric. But they had to put sound chips in the cars.
Yeah.
To
make them sound like cars, yeah.
That's it, exactly.
But a lot of car manufacturers are doing this. Like, I think BMW is one. They actually put sound chips in the car, in their electric cars, to make it sound on the inside like it's a gas-powered engine, which is kind of interesting.
I did not know that. More to the point, just want to point out that somewhere there's a warehouse full of electric Autopia cars. So maybe, that this is actually a piece of Hong Kong that might be coming out too. This is Anaheim that's going all electric, or
yeah, Anaheim first, yeah.
Okay.
And, I think the other thing that I heard that was driving this would be cast member safety. So if you look at things like exposure to exhaust fumes, that seems to be something that the cast members talk about openly. And beyond that, there's just the general issue of safety around hot internal combustion engines. The way that it was explained to me by a lawyer was teenagers and gasoline don't mix. I'm like, okay, yes, I understand that. Thank you.
Okay, but that said, an all-electric, Autopia car can drive into your shin just as easily as a gas-powered.
Yeah.
So that they'll be breathing easier, but they'll still be limping home.
Yeah, one problem at a time, Jim. That's what I'm going with. All right, last little bit of news, and speaking of electric cars, Disney announced that Test Track will close for its World of Motion-esque refurb, with the last day of operations being June 16th, 2024. Jim, the concept art here is pretty vague, so we don't know a whole lot about the visuals, but I did include a piece of the concept art in the show notes. This to me looks like if you put a test track car in the middle of Universe of Energy, like it's giving dinosaur vibes.
I to be honest, I was looking at the shaft of light coming out from whatever that is, and it's like, are we sure we aren't driving through the Temple of Doom? I mean, did we upset Mara?
They used Photoshop here and used layers. They could have put an Indiana Jones car in front of this and reused the concept art, right? Yeah. All right, fine. Anyway, so the thing I can't figure out here is how long this refurb is going to be. I mean, if they're changing out the theme and the cars, this isn't a 90-day facelift thing. This is like 6 months to a year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's an interesting choice. Now, quick question: Commuter Core Plaza will be open by this point, right? So
yeah, it opens I believe the week before.
Okay, so in theory, that's supposed to absorb the people who no longer can get in to Test Track. That they will have something to do when they visit the park, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that alone to me suggests lengthy rehab. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how taking Test Track out of the Genie Plus inventory for Epcot is going to play. On the one hand, it is Test Track has always been one of the least reliable rides in Walt Disney World. So when it breaks down and those Genie Plus reservations become a good anywhere reservation, having Test Track offline is going to lessen the impact of that, the sudden and unplannable impact of that for other attractions. On the other hand, there just aren't that many thrill rides in Epcot with Genie Plus, right? So this is just going to stress that out a little bit more.
Okay, let's hope it's 9 months, a year?
That's what I think, 9 months to a year. Yeah, exactly. All right, on to listener questions. Our friend Jim wrote in about last week's episode on Discovery Island and said, I love the episode. I had a vague memory of a school field trip that involved bird spotting, learning about Walt Disney World's water management and conservation lands, and a super hazy memory of the utilidors or some other behind-the-scenes area. I'd never definitively figured out where the bird watching was, but your description of Discovery Island and reading about it in Fox Nolte's new book, Hidden History of Walt Disney World, I'm now sure I went there back then. All right. Yeah, thank you for that, Jim. All right, so let me just say this. Number one, I would pay valid American currency for a guided tour of Disney's water management and laundry facilities. Like, that is the kind of thing that I would do. Also, I'm reading Fox's book right now, and we're going to have her on the show this summer when she's ready to release her next book. So if you have questions for Fox, start sending them in now.
Cool. Got my own copy of that one and also enjoying it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right. Our pal Kelly writes in with a suggestion and an idea to consider. In the last few episodes, you've mentioned the addition of animals in the retheming of Dinoland. I know a few ears from Disney might be listening, so I'd appreciate if you could work in capybaras into the conversation. They were adorable South American animals that were featured heavily in the Encanto ads, but didn't pan out in the movie. Also, I've been wondering about your opinion on Magic Kingdom crowd control issues if they go through with this Beyond Big Thunder. Every time it's mentioned, I get some low-key anxiety thinking about adding capacity to that park. All of those extra bodies funneling through Main Street and competing for spots for the one fireworks show every night would be stressful. I'm curious if you've thought of this all the way through or if it's just me. Thank you for your wonderful content every week. All right, so Jim, capybaras, I think we all get behind that, right?
Well,
100%.
They're guinea pigs on steroids. Yeah, so yes,
exactly.
Absolutely. Okay.
I mean, the plush alone would pay for the land, right? All right, so regarding the crowds, I went back and looked, and contemporaneous to the opening of New Fantasyland, Disney said that it added a few thousand guests to the Magic Kingdom's overall park capacity. So it's reasonable to assume the same sort of per person per foot calculations here, depending on how much of that area they develop. Again, we just talked about that a few minutes ago. This Beyond Big Thunder project could be up to 3 or 4 times larger than New Fantasyland, just sort of squinting at a map. So, I mean, you could see 7,000 to 10,000 people additionally in the parks. And I'm sure Kelly can throw elbows with the best of them to get a good spot for fireworks, but you just run into a numbers problem with that many extra people in the hub, right? So, Jim, let me throw an idea out here. If this Beyond Big Thunder area expands to a position directly behind Fantasyland Castle, you would have an alternate viewing area for the fireworks so that people in, quote, the Beyond, and Jim, that's what I'm calling it for now, the Beyond, So those, it's the t-shirts again. So they don't have to try and fit in front of the castle to see the fireworks if they could see it from behind the castle. And that would mean another sort of like building or structure or something for projection videos. So just keep that idea in mind.
And remember, one of the ideas that has been on the table for this is supposedly the long lusted after Disney villains land.
I still think that's the best idea for that.
No, yeah, totally. 100%. And, and that has to include a castle, doesn't it? Oh, like you said, another projection service.
Yeah. And you've already talked about the challenges of just getting guests out of the park from all the way back in the beyond, right? Yeah. And you'll need more buses and stuff too. So there's a lot of logistical things to work out here. And that's why I don't expect to see anything opening here anytime soon. What did you say your timeline was for Beyond Big Thunder?
Okay, so realistically, what I've heard is that the Animal Kingdom redo with our Encanto Indy thing, 2026 is when that we expect to see that turned on. And then what's rumored is that it's New Fantasyland revisited, in that we'll get a phase 1 and a phase 2, but that'll be 2027 and 2028 at the earliest. So if it's a response to Epic Universe that the company was going for, it's a delayed response.
Yeah, here's the way I'm looking at this now, right? We're talking about a 10-year plan. I'm sure Disney's thought of this, but just in case they haven't, I'm expecting some sort of financial crisis, because that's been what's happened every decade for the last 2 decades, right? Once every 7 or 8 years, we have a financial crisis now. So that's going to slow things down. So I'm thinking here more like 2030-ish. We'll see. I hope it's sooner, but and I do think it'll be in phases too, just like New Fantasyland, especially if they start working from the current part of Frontierland back. They could open up in phases like they did with New Fantasyland. So we'll see. All right. Last listener email from Carly, who writes in with a great question related to Kelly's. She said, on last week's show, you mentioned that the Dinoland redo was likely not getting a new e-ticket attraction. Using Touring Plans data on attractions with high user ratings and low downtime, what ride type or system would you suggest goes into a new land to make it a highly repeatable success? Would a copy and retheme of something like Slinky Dog Dash be supported by the data? And is there a recipe for a great land, in your opinion, like family coaster plus water ride plus spinning ride plus air conditioned show, etc.? Yeah, so this is a great question for a number of reasons. One is, we've talked about this on a previous show, but we're looking at different rope drop strategies for Hollywood studios based on ride downtime data with some students at Wake Forest University. And one of the things that they seem to have picked up on through the data is that attractions that have built-in reliability, like Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, the 3 tracks of Toy Story Mania, things like that, have higher reliability than attractions like Slinky Dog, which don't. So number one, whatever you build has to have some sort of redundant, fault-tolerant capability, and especially if it's going to be like an e-ticket ride. And in that case, I think Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run is a canonical example of what a good, e-ticket ride is built to be with reliability. I think everyone likes water rides for their repeatability, Jim.
If we're talking Florida versus California, absolutely. The definitely behind the water ride.
Yeah. The thing I like about a water ride too is if you look at the concept art that Universal has released so far, water is a integral component of everything that they've shown so far. And that makes sense if you look, they're building right now for 30 years in the future. 30 years from now, we all know that it's going to be hotter in Central Florida than it is now. So adding in water, adding in plants, adding in shade has to be part of the long-term plan for every theme park in Central Florida. So I think water ride is there. We just talked about it with Dinoland, that we expect to see a water ride there. This fits in with that. Yeah, and air conditioned show. Not entirely sure about that for Dinoland, but definitely you want e-ticket thrill ride, family friendly water ride, the spinning ride we're going to get. That's sort of like a capacity thing. Yeah, I think that's good enough for a ride. And I think Jim too, we're done with the era of 1 or 2 attraction lands. I think 3 is now the number.
We were just talking about, the Beyond Big Thunder and the notion of, 3 rides, 4 rides gives you the capacity, and more to the point, gives people, while I'm waiting, I'll go in the shops, or while we're here, let's eat. So,
exactly,
other revenue streams.
And 3 gives you the ability to sort of close off the land for corporate events as well, right? 3 seems like the magic number for that. So excellent. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Jim tells us how Walt Disney World's Tomorrowland came to be. We'll be right back.
Here's a phrase that perhaps you've never heard before. Fitness starts with food. Which, when you think about it, only makes sense. I mean, if you want to keep your strength up, your meals really should have some extra protein in them. Likewise, if you really want to start doing right by your body, the food that you eat should have ingredients in it, well, that has some integrity. This is why, if you're determined to eat better these days, you have to check out Factor. Factor offers fresh, never-frozen meals that come straight to your door. We're talking chef-prepared, dietitian-approved offerings that come in Protein Plus, Keto, Vegan and Veggie, as well as Calorie Smart. Nancy and I just tried some of Factor's Calorie Smart meals. No prep, no mess, just heat and eat in 2 minutes. She had the herbed Greek chicken with tomato penne, while I had the Southwestern-style ground pork with black beans. Both of these meals were just 500 calories, and man, they were really delicious. So stop stressing over what to eat and let Factor, America's #1 ready-to-heat meal kit, send you fresh, never-frozen meals straight to your door. Head to factormeals.com/dish50 and use code DISH50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. Again, that's code DISH50 at factormeals.com/dish50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. We thank Factor for sponsoring today's show. Walt Disney once said that for every laugh there should be a tear, which is why, I think anyway, he would have loved Drawn to Life, that hugely entertaining, surprising and emotional spectacle that's now being presented live on stage at Disney Springs in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. Presented by Cirque du Soleil and Disney, this is a show that I can guarantee you will captivate audiences of all ages. I saw this show during a recent trip to Walt Disney World, and let me tell you, I'm ready to go see it again right now. Drawn to Life is filled with breathtaking acrobatics, stunning visuals, and heartwarming storytelling. The creative geniuses behind Cirque du Soleil and Walt Disney Animation Studios have come together to create this show where imagination literally knows no bounds. Filled with dazzling performances, not to mention beloved Disney characters coming to life in ways you've only just dreamed about, Drawn to Life is a must-see, family-friendly spectacle that will leave you, well, in awe. So don't miss out on your chance to be part of the magic. Plan your visit to Disney Springs today and reserve your seats for Drawn to Life by Cirque du Soleil and Disney, live on stage. Set your imagination in motion. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So how's your social battery doing right now? You know, the amount of time and energy that you're willing to expend this time of year when it comes to dealing with friends and family. Because let's be honest here, people. Between things like Sunday dinner and kids' concerts and soccer games and graduations and baby showers, spring can be just exhausting. And if your social battery is really running low right about now, but you still can't bring yourself to say no because you're afraid of offending or disappointing someone, maybe it's time you spoke to someone who can teach you a little something about establishing boundaries. And you know who can help with stuff like that? A therapist. And if therapy is something you're considering, well, why not give BetterHelp a try? BetterHelp is entirely online. It's convenient and affordable therapy that's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and then BetterHelp will match you with one of 35,000 licensed therapists based on your location, preference, and therapist availability. Look, anyone who's previously listened to this podcast knows I'm a divorcee. More to the point that I was in a pretty dark place when my ex moved back home to Hawaii and took our then 2-year-old daughter with her. Therapy gave me the tools I needed to climb out of that dark place, and these days, life is sweet. And speaking of sweet, find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/DisneyDish today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/DisneyDish. We thank them for sponsoring today's show.
So, Jim, we've been talking about Disneyland's Tomorrowland
Yep.
for the last couple of weeks. And in the immortal words of Derek Bergen, be fair to Florida.
Well, there we go. But this is the thing. A lot of people from 2024, look back at Walt Disney World's Tomorrowland and figure, oh, in 71, that must have been amazing. And, and face it, we've all seen the visuals from opening day of the contemporary looming up over the park, and you could see, in the monorail that it went through the contemporary, and it all looked very futuristic. But here's the thing: if you actually went back to the fall of 1971, Len, and again, forgive me for trotting out my English major chops here, but and quoting T.S. Eliot, but it was a wasteland. All right, I mean, we were just talking about.
Wait, T.S. Eliot, or are you quoting Roger Daltrey there?
All right, let's go with Daltrey. Okay,
let's do that.
Okay, but I mean, when that side of the park opened, with the exception of three things, you could do the Grand Prix Raceway. You could do the Skyway. Now, mind you, what was interesting about the Skyway is, long ago when this theme park actually had a Skyway, you could go Fantasyland to Tomorrowland, or you could go Tomorrowland to Fantasyland. You had to get off. Whereas in the fall of 71, you got a round trip. And you got a round trip because...
Really? I didn't know that. It was a round trip?
Well, because they hadn't finished the station,
Sort of a forced round trip because there was no exit.
Well, no, that's it exactly. You'd fly over a construction fence and, you'd wave to the right-to-work person who'd been hired to work on the park and go through the station and then head back to Fantasyland. Now, mind you, from there, you got an absolutely killer view of the Contemporary and that monorail. But that was it. You could see the future. You couldn't necessarily experience it.
You couldn't touch it. Yeah.
No,
okay.
no.
All right.
And by the way, another interesting aspect of Walt Disney World during this weird window of time, the roughly, let's say, the fall of 71 through the spring of 72, because horticulture had just put stuff in, and everybody knows the famous story about Dick Nunes in front of the Contemporary, them laying down the sod the night before it opened with green side up, green side up.
Green side up.
There we go. But this was what was interesting, that when you were inside the park, again, you were in Tomorrowland, you could see the Contemporary looming up over.
Not only that, but we've seen photos, Jim, and it's dirt between you and the Contemporary.
Yeah. But the other thing that's fascinating is, as you were walking through Adventureland Plaza, you could actually look off across Seven Seas Lagoon and see the the longhouses, the Polynesian Village Resort, sort of sticking up over. I mean, again, by the spring of 72, all of this stuff had grown up. But I once got the chance to sit down with John Hench and flat out asked him, was that the plan? And he was like, well, sort of. It just said, look, it was a happy accident when the park first opened that you could see the Poly from inside the park. But he said, on the other hand, we had designed the Thai resort, the Asian themed. And Len, that was actually, think about it. The Contemporary you could see at that point from inside the park. And that was 120 feet tall.
140 feet?
140, my mistake. Okay. Whereas the Thai resort was going to be 160, the central building. And the notion was that it was just close enough that it would have loomed over the Jungle Cruise. And it's sort of like, what is that? We should go find that. On the other hand, and this is the heartbreaker, the Persian, the one that was supposed to be built on Bay Lake between the Contemporary and the dry dock, they had done balloon tests. They knew that when you stood at the edge of the 20K lagoon and looked off in the distance, the onion domes for that resort would have loomed up over, and it's like, that looks very.
So they would have used external hotels external to the park as weenies to draw you back into the park. That is super interesting.
Well, and at the same time, the notion was, that view was supposed to look very Fantasylandy, so it would work. Likewise, the Thai looming over the jungle, that was Adventurelandy. But again, we've talked about this. The the 1-2 punch of the Arab-Israeli war, followed by the Arab oil embargo, and Disney. I mean, they had started site prep for the Asia Pavilion. That thing was ready to go. They had in fact, they were in the process of revising the blueprints because the decision had been made to lower the room count from 600 to 500 rooms. And again, they stomped the brakes hard, and that project did not go forward.
Wow.
But anyway, we were talking about the 2 attractions that you could experience in Tomorrowland when the park opened in October of 71. Again, Grand Prix Raceway, Skyway. But the other thing that, to be honest, Disney worked incredibly hard to get open was the Tomorrowland Terrace, the quick service restaurant. Today, we know it as Cosmic Rays. This had to open. They had no choice. Oh. They had so little quick service ready for opening day. Yeah. That it was just sort of like, this has to open.
And that's huge. I mean, the capacity for that's got to be close to 1,000 people, I would guess.
Oh, easy. But I apologize for those of you who are sitting here going, wait a minute, Tomorrowland Terrace, that I've had dessert there. That's on the other side of the park. It's like, no. Back in 71, if you took the road that was closest to the castle down toward the Mad Tea Party, which, by the way, that version of the Tea Party didn't have a roof. Another thing that eventually got fixed. But Tomorrowland Terrace was right there on the right. Now, when they did the new Tomorrowland project in 1994, when they opted to go with the future that never was, they shut down in September, and that's when they loaded in the Sunny Eclipse animatronic and that sort of thing. And during that window of time, Len, the Plaza Pavilion, this had been created as part of the further expansion of Tomorrowland, but also because the park desperately needed more quick service. This was a counter service place that served burgers, that sort of thing. For when it came back up, suddenly the restaurant that was known previously as the Plaza Pavilion is now the Tomorrowland Terrace Noodle Station. And Len,
I was there. I was there on opening day.
Okay. And did you have noodles? Because I've never met anybody who's actually had noodles.
I had them. So the opening day, it was, oh God, when was it? It felt like it was summer or fall because it was hot. It was hot on that day. I remember that. And I remember getting an udon noodle bowl with, I believe, tempura shrimp. And it was fine for what it was. But Jim, the idea of eating fried seafood in the heat of a Florida summer from a big bowl of steaming udon broth was not what I was looking for at that time. But no, I did eat there opening day. Yeah, this was like right around the time where I started to get interested in sort of like the operational aspects of the park. So yeah.
Okay. So right up there with the Handwich, right? I mean, the research had borne out. There was people who were going to the Magic Kingdom would say, you know what would make this better? Noodles, yeah. And I remember like where I actually sat. I sat in sort of like the upper seating aerial of it too. But yeah, it was a kind of a one and done for me there. The interesting thing is that particular space, and I think you've talked about this, but that particular space does not have a lot of kitchen equipment. Like you can't do a whole lot there. No, that's part of the story we'll be getting to in the second half of the show, to the effect of when they made the decision that we need additional quick service. But, they shoehorned that in there. They didn't build a big enough kitchen because they couldn't. They had to make room for the show buildings back there. And speaking of the show buildings, it took 6 weeks before we got our first official Tomorrowland attraction opening. And that was America the Beautiful, the Circle Vision 360.
The film, yeah.
So that opened for Thanksgiving on November 25th, 71. And then on Christmas Eve, Len, we got Flight to the Moon, December 24th, 1971. Wow. Then we had to wait another 6 months until If You Had Wings opened up, June 5th, 72.
But what a wait, Jim. It was totally worth it for that.
Okay.
I got nothing but love for that attraction.
Okay. But here's the thing. After that, it's a more than 2-year-long pause before any other attraction comes online at Walt Disney World's version of Tomorrowland. And why the pause? Well, some of it has to do with Epcot, the city. Some of it has to do with Florida's version of Pirates of the Caribbean. And still more of it has to do with Circus World, a rival theme park that the Mattel Corporation had announced in September of 72, less than 1 year after the Walt Disney World opened. And this project was going to be built just 10 miles down the road from the Magic Kingdom in Haines City. And the interesting thing is that park terrified Disney. And in fact, kind of a lovely bookend to today's show, given everything we were just describing, Bob Iger talking about at the shareholders meeting about, no, of course we're not reacting to Epic Universe. Why would you say that? This was the Epic Universe of 1972, Len.
And wait, so who was CEO of Disney? In 72? Was it Ron Miller?
By then it was Card Walker.
Card Walker. So did Card Walker get up in front of shareholders and say, our response to Circus World is everything that we just built? You know what? I'm going to let the laughs be our answer for that one.
There we go.
All right, so you're going to talk about Circus World next week?
We'll get to the second half. And by the way, that fascinating little bend on this story, Circus World had one of the Walt's favorite Imagineers working on it, Rolly Crump.
Really?
Yep.
All right, can't wait to hear that. All right, folks, that's going to do it for the show today. You can help support our show by subscribing over at patreon.com/JimHillMedia, where we're posting exclusive shows every week. The most recent show is a bonus video with Imagineer Jim Schull, covering how Jim converted Disneyland Paris's Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith into the Iron Man-themed Avengers Assemble Flight Force. Check it out at patreon.com/JimHillMedia. You can find more of Jim at JimHillMedia.com and more of me, Len, at TouringPlans.com. We're produced spectacularly by Eric Hersey, who'll be giving composting tips as well as how to turn an orange peel into a small explosive. Maybe let's call that one organic pest management for the newspapers, Eric? At the Sisters of St. Joseph Linger Over Breakfast event with gardening, butterfly, and sustainability tips on Saturday, April 20th, 2024 at St. Teresa's Academy on Main Street in beautiful downtown Kansas City, Missouri. Because you know that nuns are all about improvised explosives. While Eric's doing that, please go into iTunes and rate our show and tell us what you'd like to hear next. For Jim, this is Len. We will see you on the next show.